Hi, David. Nice to see you.
Good to see you, Nick.
David Bird, Retail Director for Thames Water.
Yes.
Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us on Leaders in Focus. You have had an extraordinarily challenging organisation and role to work in. You took the role in 2022. I guess the first place I'd like to start is just to ask you, what was it that attracted you to the opportunity in 2022?
Two reasons, Nick. One is I think Thames is the biggest corporate turnaround that is going on in the UK at the moment. So massive transformational challenge. And the second reason is what Thames is about, and that's really providing, life's essential service. And those two things together for me gave me a real business challenge, but also a real purpose as to what I was there to do to support the team in really turning around this business that has had a huge amount of negative publicity over the last few years.
And you've had a career, or certainly the last part of your career, specifically in turnaround situations. Is that what that was your sort of core strength, if you like, that you were bringing?
Yeah, I've worked in a number of different sectors, from healthcare, retail, mobile telcos, transport. Most of those have either been big profit and loss or big turnaround situations. But for me, it's always been about putting the customer at the heart of that transformation.
And I'm very conscious of somebody sort of sitting outside a brand like Thames Water that, you're being hammered left, right and centre, whether it's from kind of key stakeholders, whether it's from the public. And I'm just wondering how, and it's really the conversation I wanted to have with you, is how do you maintain and run and drive and motivate, and so there's lots of questions in here, a team to perform ultimately, because there's still a job to be done. How would you describe the culture internally of Thames Water?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's an incredibly challenging external environment. Partly where I get my energy from is actually the people dealing with our customers. They are incredibly passionate about what they do, and a lot of them have been there a long time, have seen a lot of change, but are really committed to doing the right thing for customers. And it is really unfortunate that some of the negative coverage we get is about decisions that were made 10, 15, even 20 years ago. But I think you have to go into these type of environments and decide what can you control and what you can't, and not let those things that you can't control keep you awake at night. Otherwise, you just don't stand a chance of turning up fresh every day, ready to fight the good fight, as it were.
And you initially went in on an interim basis, is that right?
Yes, that's right. Recruited by Sarah Bentley, the chief exec at that point. She was recruiting a new team in to turn the business around. Did 6 months, and it is probably one of the best cultures that I've worked in, actually, in terms of passionate about customers, turning the business around. But, an incredible situation. When I arrived, it was all about, operationally getting the business working. It very quickly became a big financial external funding issue, and making sure that we were getting the right financial settlement for the business in order to make it successful in the longer term and deliver for what our customers need over the next 10, 20 years.
How do you then, there's two elements to this, how do you retain your team? I mean, you're responsible overall for about 1,200 people. How do you maintain the best people in place and continue career development? And also, how do you attract? Because I would have thought at the same period, you're probably a bit of a honeypot for recruiters who are going to come to your organisation and say, look, there's something much better over here and it's much calmer. So just wondering that kind of retention and attraction bit, what you can tell us about that.
It's definitely been hard to attract some roles. What I think you'll find is in this type of situation, it naturally attracts those of us that are mad enough to enjoy the challenge and wanting to do the right thing. But that purpose around Thames does have a huge pull for people. There are huge environmental challenges that we have to address. There are huge customer issues that we've got to address. but that is actually what's appealing for a lot of people.
Yeah. You touched on the fact that I'm not letting you off the hook, that a lot of the issues have been built over the last 5, 10, 15, arguably. How long since I guess privatisation was when it would have sort of potentially goes back as long as that. So, focusing on the kind of now and the kind of key KPIs around, last year, this year, next year, how do you silence the noise around you in terms of the constant impact and potentially interference?
One, I think it's been really clear with the teams what's important, and we've been very clear in terms of developing a turnaround plan where we've delivered on key priorities. And that's really hard because 6 months on, there's suddenly a challenge, shouldn't we be doing more in one particular area? But I think we've held true to what we said was important, and those predominantly are things that are important to customers, so pollutions, reducing complaints, reducing leakage, all the core operational elements. What I think's been really important is to prove to our colleagues on the ground that we can make a difference and that we can turn things around. And you can only do that. There are no silver bullets in a business that's as big and as complex as Thames. And therefore, really putting energy and focus on those priorities has been a real, one, it's been a challenge, but I think we're starting to see some real improvement. So a really good example is we've seen, just complaints year on year, another 20% reduction year to date against last year. Our leakages are the lowest that we've had for a considerable time. So we are making operational progress. What we've got to do is take our customers on the journey, explain to them why we need the investment that's required to tackle climate change and huge population growth. Mm-hmm. We currently supply 2.6 billion litres of fresh water every day, and by 2050 we'll need another billion litres of water. So we've got to continue investment.
Across what size customer base again?
It's 16 million, roughly.
I mean, it puts it into context, and I think often the scale and the numbers, when people are reading that piece of news, they're not necessarily attaching it to the scale of the customer base that you're working with. Yeah. And also they're sort of locked in customers because there's no real opportunity for them to go somewhere else. So you have a job, obviously, to deliver service to that in a way that I guess brings those complaints and service down, service delivery up.
It's a real challenge when you're dealing with, we supply 25% of the UK population with their water and wastewater services. So, there was an example at the weekend where we had a burst main. Now, when your pipes go 3 times around the world, the customers in that area would say, well, why weren't you repairing that main in advance of it breaking? But, that is incredibly challenging. But when I look at what the teams have done, we had 48 tankers out over the weekend, making sure that we continue the supply of drinking water. Now, most of those customers won't know that that was going on. In other areas, we've absolutely dropped the ball, and we've had customers without water for 3 or 4 days. And that is when they realise just how important the service we provide is.
And I'm just thinking about your team and I guess what they're having to contend with. Is it, are the conversations on the phones more challenging? Are people, are the customers much more, I guess, much more quickly likely to turn that conversation into a negative, somehow attaching, I guess, the external noise?
Yeah, that we get a lot of pushback about. It's this sort of and another thing conversation. I've got a problem with my bill or my meter isn't working, and I've just read that, executive remuneration is in the public domain, or challenges around the financing of the business, and it just, I think, is used to support the frustration that customers have if we don't get it right. And there's a lot that we do need to work on to improve what we do.
Yeah. And your team now, if you look at the executive team, it's shrunk down quite significantly over the last 18 months. From what I can see, it's a very tight knit team of people that I guess are having to make some pretty significant decisions, not necessarily rapidly, but there's a sort of move forward fast mentality to what you're trying to achieve. How are you disseminating your decisions, I guess, down into your team? You've got a direct team of 5 or 6 people that are working directly for you. How quickly is that then getting into the rest of the organisation?
Yeah, I mean, by tightening up the senior exec team, it's enabled, I think, far faster decision making. And by focusing on the priorities in the turnaround plan, I think the whole organisation is a lot more aligned. We're running a program called Living Leaders at the moment to get a common language around one, I think the expectations of what we want from our leadership team. But also I think it's having really open conversations. The one thing that struck me when I arrived is people told you what you wanted to hear. And that has taken not a lot of time, but it's taken time to say, no, I'd rather have the truth. I can deal with that. And if we need extra investment, that's my job to then go and argue for that. And if not, prioritise what we are going to spend our money on. But I think there was always a sense of, let's just sort of put in place the targets that everybody will be comfortable with rather than what's realistic. And I think in the last 12 months, there's been a massive dose of realism brought into the business, which for me is only a good thing. And that has helped us really build credibility then that we are delivering on the promises that we said we would, however difficult some of the initial conversations are being.
So a lot of the time we spend thinking about future and from a strategy point of view, being able to define very, very clearly where we're going. I'm wondering how, as a senior leadership team, you're doing that, and can you see beyond the next 12 months, or is it simply a 6 months to 6 month strategy that you're working on?
No, we've got a vision and a strategy to take us to 2050. And I think that's really important when you look at climate change and the environmental impacts that are facing the whole of the region we support. Obviously, people don't think in those type of time horizons when they're turning up on a daily basis. So we've then got a 5-year business plan, and that is more for the regulator and to get the right level of investment. And then we've got our turnaround plan that we're 2.5 years through. We're currently just finalising a customer strategy, which we've got a lot of engagement from our frontline teams and people like our customer challenge group. And I think that's going to be really important to be really clear where are we focusing, what are we going to do, and how are we going to get there, so that in a simple way everybody can articulate that and we've got the rigour behind it. Because again, my sense at Thames is we've often had a lot of sort of nice aspirational targets, but we haven't had the rigour behind making sure that those are delivered consistently.
And as a team, what can you say about what you see as the challenges to achieve that strategy? The strategy in front of you. What are the pillars that you need in place to be able to deliver?
We definitely need the right levels of investment. I think we're working with the regulator on that, and that is a challenge, but I think that's to be expected because it's our customers' money. Part of the challenges in particularly my area is our ability to move at pace on improving our digital infrastructure, because we have got so many out of date and obsolete systems that systems architecture is a real challenge. But I think it's also giving our teams back the confidence. We've got a lot of new people in the area. We've onshored all of our work that was being done in South Africa back into the UK. I think that's made a massive difference to our service levels and the feeling of ownership of our teams in terms of the customers we support. But it's not a simple journey. I think for me, with my direct team, it's about we've had really open and honest conversations, and it takes time to build trust. But I think we now have got a level of trust in the team that we're starting to have the more difficult conversations, and that's really positive.
And the separation or the closure of the ventures business, does this just allow for greater clarity and greater kind of single purpose on what Thames Water is here to do, rather than obviously what was a significant opportunity in renewable energy and those?
I mean, we still will. A lot of our energy is done through renewable sources that are on our sites. I believe that we will want to take advantage of those commercial opportunities, because that is one way of subsidising the funding for our customers. So that will be important. But I think there are more important issues for us to address in the immediate term, and hence some of the decisions around the decision not to fund ventures going forward.
So I think you're about 20 months in, I think, to the role. Is it about 20 months? I mean, no regrets having taken it. Certainly from what I've heard from a kind of an engagement point of view and how the team works with you, it's certainly been something that you've gained value from and they're gaining value from. I'm wondering when and what the future looks like, because the likely sense of direction is that there'll be a new owner, there'll be new funding, and then at what point do you feel the job's done? Because it feels like there's quite a lot of rungs on the ladder left for you.
I think there are. I mean, I think because the whole sector works to these 5-year regulatory cycles, in my head is we're just signing off that plan. We'll find out what the regulator has determined is an acceptable level of funding from our customers in the next few months. For me, I want to deliver that plan and see that through. I think it's really exciting. It will form a basis of a transformational plan. I think the scale and size of what's required at Thames this is not a 2-year fix. But I think in the next 3 to 5 years, it will be an incredibly different business to the one that is now. And then I'm sure my boss will have a view on how long he'd like me to be around for. But I think that natural 5-year period does make you rethink about, am I here for another 5 or do I set it up and then move on? But it's for me, there's a good chunk of period to get to.
How do you keep yourself focused and fit and kind of at a level where you can play as hard as you need to play in an organisation that's undergoing this many challenges?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing for me about this job, in previous roles, I've often been sort of living away from home, getting up at 5 in the morning and driving for 4 hours and, visiting sites all over the country. Here I'm able to get up at 5 and go for a swim before work in the morning and still be in the office at sort of 7:45. So I think it is really important to keep that sort of, I'm certainly not a fitness fanatic, but that sort of half an hour in the morning just gives me a chance to think through what's coming up in the day, keep yourself a bit fit. And it is the usual things. We were talking a while back about I've become a grandparent, which is scary. So actually when you sort of got a 9-month-old sort of that you're trying to feed occasionally, that does bring you down to earth and actually takes your mind off some other sort of challenging sort of business cases that you're trying to read the night before.
I think there'll be a lot of people watching this impressed that you're a grandparent.
Right.
So it seems a little bit early.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time. Obviously, it's an incredibly challenging role that you walked into and that you're still fighting the fight to deliver. And I wish you every success over the next couple of years in continuing to deliver the turnaround plan. And thanks so much.
That's great, Nick. Thanks for your time.